So good evening, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Steve. Thanks for spending several times with us this morning. It's now roughly 30 years we both are working within Page. And as everyone, you started as a consultant, as I did. And since now 2006, you are the CEO of Page. So I've seen how you have evolved and your leadership style and your management style, and I think you are a very engaging and an inspiring CEO. So we'll ask you a certain number of what I'm going to say. You're my boss anyway. What I'm going to ask you first is probably, in your opinion, what makes a good leader? Very wide question.
It is a wide question.
Do you need to be a good leader?
That's assuming I'm a good leader. Look, I think all leaders constantly strive to improve, or they should. I'm not sure we ever perfect it. I personally believe it's got to start with you and your behaviours. You've got to be a role model. You know, you've got to basically exemplify or demonstrate the values and the behaviours that the company represents. So you have to be a role model to all, in our case, 7,000 people. I think the second thing is you have to have authenticity, which means you're believable. You know, we're going to go through difficult moments. We're going to have lots of different challenges. I'm going to have to make unpopular decisions. They have to be able to trust me, and they have to believe in me as a person. And so it's very important to always be genuine, always be you, be the person that you are, and so on. I think next you've got to have passion. I guess because you're right, 34 years in my case, they probably guess I must have passion for the business after all this time. You know, I've seen the company grow from 200 people to 7,000 people. Clearly a lot has changed in that time. And I think you must demonstrate that passion every day. The day you stop demonstrating passion as a leader, you shouldn't be the leader. You've got to be visible. I think this is more today than maybe yesterday, but now people expect you to be visible. They expect to see you, to recognize you, to hear you. And with the technology that's available today, you've got to make sure people can literally hear it from you. They don't want a memo. You've got to be decisive. You've got to make decisions. I mean, there's going to be some very tough ones, some very horrible ones, which people are going to find difficult. But you've got to be honest and tell them why and make those decisions. You've got to have the energy. You know, it's very long days. We're in 37 geographies around the world. You know, somebody's always awake somewhere, which means you could be working very early, very late. And you've got to show that energy and stamina all of the time, because people won't be happy if you're running out of energy. And then finally, you've got to have courage. You know, there's going to be facing into some very difficult situations. And ultimately, you know, the buck stops with you. You know, there isn't somebody to discuss it with who's above you or even at your level. So ultimately, you can hear people's opinions beneath you, but you've got to make the decision, and you've got to have the courage to make that decision, and sometimes very fast. So yes, you have to have the courage to do that as well. All of those things I'm trying to improve on, Nico. So you know, to become a good leader one day, that's I think what you need to have.
Thank you very much. You started as a CEO in 2006, so it's now nearly a little 15 years, roughly. Soon 15 years as a CEO. How has the position of CEO has evolved in 15 years? Is the job the same than 15 years ago?
Yeah, 15 years is, when you say it like that, it's a long time, isn't it? Look, it has changed phenomenally, and I think all leaders should be aware of it because it's changing very rapidly, particularly when you have the challenges we've had this year. The main thing, I suppose, that's changed is technology. And, you know, if you go back 15 years ago, if you remember what we didn't have back then, and the tools that we have today, like this one, you know, the video tools that we all have, thankfully, which clearly we've had to use this year during coronavirus. So that's probably the first thing. Those technology teams, tools that we use inside Page. So we have Yammer, which is an internal social media. And this has attracted in our second quarter when coronavirus 15 million likes or comments and so forth on Yammer internally. So it just shows how important people feel it is to communicate between each other. Microsoft Teams, which is the tool we use obviously to video interview, but most importantly to stay connected to each other. And you know, I, as you know, communicated to all 7,000 people around the world. We had to do it in shifts because of the time zones, but we were able to engage with all of the staff. I could talk to everybody directly. We use videos, all of these different methods, which today is just normal, but a leader wouldn't have been able to use. And because they're there, your employees expect you to use it. So I think that's the first thing. The next, I would say, in terms of changing, is that when I was young, we were basically told what to do, and we largely obeyed and did it without question. Often, I mean, maybe later we'd be questioning it in the pub and saying, you know, why are these decisions being made? But we just did as we were told. We were instructed and we followed those instructions. Today it's very, very different. You know, young people are very inquisitive. They want to understand why, which is the purpose a company has. They want to understand how, the values we have. These are really important, and all of the other elements that that motivate them or don't, and such as diversity and inclusion, CSR, corporate social responsibility. These things are critical, and if they don't believe in the strategy of the group, they don't believe in the decisions you're making, they don't believe in our values or our purpose, they don't believe in our CSR policy or our approach to diversity and inclusion, then you are going to lose good people. So, you know, this is a real focus, I think, for people, and a real difference between when I first started as a leader. I think the culture of the organization, which is probably the heading you could give to what I've just described, and then other things like, for example, flexibility. It's an obvious one to mention, you know, after what we've seen this year with the with COVID. The reality is your approach to how you work, physically how you work, and you know, we're trying to engage with different populations. You know, the answer isn't always to start early in the morning and finish late at night, or whatever approach is acceptable in a particular country. People want flexibility of that approach. You know, they might not want to be in the office. They might want to start late and finish early. They might not want to be in the office 5 days, whatever it is. And I think we have to approach it differently. So all of these things are huge differences. And as a leader, if you want to stay locked in how you remember it when you were young, then frankly, you're going to fail as a leader. You have to be appropriate to the audience today. Otherwise, you're dead.
And what have you done specifically to manage this change? I mean, you just said flexibility, the culture, the D&I. What have you done as a leader? When have you realized you had to change? And what have been the different steps you have been engaging?
Yeah, I mean, well, some of these things when I became the CEO, I wanted to change straight away. So our approach to CSR, for example, the first year I was CEO, we elected a charity of the year in the UK, and very quickly other countries followed and did something similar. And we would all work outside of work hours, at weekends, in the evenings, all with a common goal to support that particular charity. And then, you know, this charity was elected by people voting. So it was the employees deciding who we should be working and helping. And we've done that now for 14 years and raised millions of pounds, which I think is phenomenal. I'm really pleased to say the charity that we're following in the UK at the moment is the charity that I'm on the board of as well, which is really, really good, which is a children's hospital in London, which you know, needs the money. We raise £10 million a year for that hospital, so Page is helping to get to that number. We focused on diversity and inclusion very early, and Nico, hopefully you'd agree that we've done a huge amount of work in this area. A lady who worked for me for 15 years, I contacted her. She stopped working because after her third child, and I managed to persuade her to come back to really dedicate her time to focus on this. And we started with gender diversity, gender balance, trying to get the same number of women as men in the business at all levels. We've made huge progress on this. I mean, we've gone from a situation where a lot of ladies that were very, very good, you know, and getting good people in recruitment is difficult. So, you know, they were very, very good. We trained them. They got to that point, and then they were doing what was natural, which is to have a family, and we were losing them. I'm glad to say that now almost 100% worldwide we're keeping. So they're having a family, but they're coming back to work. In order to do that, we've looked at flexibility and our approaches to how they work, so that we can manage their needs with our performance. Since then, we've focused on other areas of diversity as well. Ability being the obvious one, sexual preference, whatever, and we really have made huge ground in all of these areas. And as you know now, Nico, close to my heart, ability. So, you know, clearly we're going to be doing that as well. And I think finally the other thing I changed when I became CEO, which was very different from the previous CEO, was that every single country that I go to, and up until my recent situation in this virus, you know, I went to about 25, 26 countries a year. You've done a couple of those trips with me, Nico. You know, we would travel from city to city and present to every office, every employee, face to face, you know, from the receptionist to the director. We would present what's going on in the company's strategy, and we would answer questions, and some of those questions were difficult. You know, they would be about bonuses and things like that. But you know, we would handle those questions. So I tried to become very, very visible from day one. So that's the way I've tried to approach it.
Okay, thank you very much. To build your leadership, I would say, who are the three people who inspire you more in life?
I always feel a little inadequate if I'm ever asked this question, because whenever you read the newspapers or books, there's always, you know, the one person that has always inspired me. There isn't one person, Nico. I wouldn't know who the three would be. Obviously yourself, but I get inspired by everybody. I mean, everybody has something, and I think if you can steal the best bit about everybody, you know, there's always something that you admire in everyone. My children, I mean, they inspire me. You know, I have an accountant a vet and a sportswoman. You know, my 3 daughters, and they inspire me. But all the people that work for me, all the people I've worked for, there is always something you'll take from each of them that definitely inspires me. Winners inspire me, so I massively follow my sport, as you know, and anyone that wins is, I think, fantastic. And, you know, those that overcome challenges as well, and maybe because of what's happened to me recently, you know, I get inspired by people who've overcome really difficult physical situations, but not 3 people. I don't know where to start with 3 people.
Okay. Before in the introduction, we were talking about the return on luck, and what do you think? What kind of luck did you had in your life, or what kind of difficulties did you had in your life that help you to build your leadership every day since 15 years, I would say? And what have been the different steps of luck or unluck?
Well, I've always worked on the premise that you make your own luck in life. Of course, I've been lucky, but I've overcome a lot of challenges. I've got a regional managing director in the south of Europe, based in Madrid. Nightmare. But no, joking aside, I mean, I'm 58. I've had a lot of challenges. You know, suddenly I was the CEO. As you know, Nico, the previous CEO was ill. Suddenly taken ill, so he was suddenly not in work. He was off. And you know, probably a year or 2 before I was expecting to become CEO, suddenly, Steve, you're on. You know, we've got a leadership conference. It was in Barcelona, actually. Leadership conference, and Steve, you run the show. You know, I remember the first full year results presentation, and the previous CEO was back from being ill, and the slides were prepared. I hadn't seen them. I was at the presentation, and he stood up there and said, "There's no point in me talking. You might as well hear from the new CEO." And I stood up and had to present the slides that I hadn't even seen. So that, you know, that lots of challenges like that. I mean, joking aside, big IT rollouts, big technology rollouts in the company, always a challenge. I think we would agree. Balancing work, family. I'm not sure I've always got the balance right, if I'm honest. It's a very difficult thing to do, to be so committed to the company and so committed to your career, and yet so committed as a family person. I've done my best. I've probably made mistakes. I think trying to maintain the culture of the company, and again, you know how this is so important at Page.
To maintain what? Sorry, I didn't hear well. To maintain
the culture.
Okay.
And I think, you know, when we were 200 people, I knew everyone. You know, Michael Page was the leader, and, you know, we knew the culture. We could have one party and everybody would come to it. When you're in 37 geographies and you're, you know, the market leader in China, or the market leader in Latin America, or, you know, you're a market leader in France, still retaining that core culture, I think has been really difficult. And then, you know, the challenge of big decisions. I mean, as you know, I have to fire people, big people, senior people, very, very expensive people, and I have to convince the main board that I'm doing the right thing. I also have to convince people who work for that leader that I've had to fire, who maybe he was popular. And again, you'll be thinking of examples, Nico, I know you know them, but you know, it's not always easy when you can see that somebody is actually blocking the path of the company, and therefore you need to make a tough decision. And I think finally, and you know this, which is, it's a personal thing, but the biggest challenge I've had to overcome recently is you know, nearly dying in March last year, and fighting my way back. you know, from what is a very difficult physical situation. You know, I'm paralyzed. You know, I'm in a wheelchair. I've had to learn a lot of new things, and you know, in order to be efficient and be able to get back to work and do all the things I was doing before. So you know, lots of challenges. I love them. I know this sounds really weird, but you know, I've been through a lot of downturns. I've seen Page public as a public company. I've seen us as a private company. I've seen us as a public company again. So I've been through taking us private, and I've been through an IPO. I've been through a defense when Adecco tried to buy us. You know, suddenly I'm in front of the CEO and the chairman of Adecco, and they're telling us as to why they want to buy us. You know, I've been through a lot of those sorts of challenges as well, but it makes it exciting.
And you explained before that since last year you had an accident and you're now living in a wheelchair. We know there are not so many CEOs in a wheelchair. How does main board see that? How has it changed your life as a leader, sorry?
Look, I want to say one conversation that I had when I was in hospital. I was in hospital for 4 months. A variety of hospitals, starting in Switzerland. So I had a skiing accident. I was in a coma for a while, and they weren't sure what was wrong. You know, they knew I was paralyzed. I knew I was paralyzed because I was conscious when I had the accident, and so I dealt with the fact I was paralyzed. Mentally, I dealt with it when I was lying in a river. Upside down in my ski gear with the water running through my jacket. The only part of me that wasn't freezing cold was my legs, of course, because I can't feel them. So I'm not a doctor, but I knew I was paralyzed. So I fell into a coma for a few days, and I was in hospital in Switzerland and then the UK. I got a lot of phone calls and a lot of contact from people, obviously wishing me well. And I actually got a phone call from one of the previous directors of the company who used to work for me, and he hadn't spoken to me in many years. He asked me, he asked me how I was, and he said, "You sound pretty positive." And I said, "Well, nothing new." And he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to go back to work." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go back to run Page." And he said, "Well, you're in a wheelchair." And I said, "I know." And he said, "Well, you can't." I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because people won't see you anymore." That was really, really sad for me. You know, they won't take you seriously because you're in a wheelchair. That's what he said. He's a very, very senior leader. I cannot believe that. So to me, I've never had a problem with it. As you know, I did a couple of videos when I was in hospital explaining to everybody at Page what had happened, that I'd nearly died, that I'd upset my children, which I don't like. You know, I'd overcome a lot of challenges and so on, and was going to overcome this one. And yeah, it's tough, but you know, there's a lot of things you have to learn to do, which you know, were natural before, if you get my message. And you know, and then I got out, and to be honest, within 2 to 3 weeks, and you know this, I was already communicating with the company. I was phoning into board meetings, and then actually I made you guys come to me. I know I took you to a strange part of the UK for one of our board meetings in a little village near the hospital, and you know, so people accommodated me, and then I came back full time to work. So and you know, achieved the goal of being able to work, and honestly, it makes no difference.
Within the frame of diversity and inclusion, do you think companies are already up to date on this handicap topic? I'm
No,
talking about Page or any company you will work with.
look, I think some are better than others, and you know, I think the first thing is most companies don't understand what disability is, and disability is a huge range, as we all know, from diabetes right the way through to very obvious disabilities like this one. You know, you can see I'm disabled because I'm in a wheelchair, but a lot of people have mental health challenges or whatever, and their disability is invisible. And a lot of people are nervous about that. You know, they don't know how to approach it. They don't know what you need. I mean, I can promise you most hotels and most restaurants don't know what they need, because they'll tell me, yeah, we love disabled people. And then you get to the restaurant and there's 10 steps. And they go, well, there's only 10 small steps. And you go, my legs don't, you know. So people don't understand. But I think even those companies that do understand and will accommodate and want to accommodate, the other challenge is there are a lot of people who are disabled who don't have the confidence to want to work. And that is really, really scary. You know, when I was in the hospital, it's only a small hospital, there were quite a few people who I didn't see in the gym, and I didn't understand it. I was doing 4 hours of physio a day, which was tough, you know, with the pain. But I said, there's more people in the hospital than there is in the gym. Why? And they said, because a lot of people don't come out of their room. And I said, is that because they're very injured? And they said, no, they're the same as you. And they said they just don't want to. They've given up. It's really sad. And you know, look, I'm lucky. I was, as you say, you know, you've been lucky. I mean, if you're injured late in life, which I was, I've done a lot of things in my 57 years. You know, I've done a lot of physical things. I was big in my sport, and you know, so I'm very, very happy. And my career is okay. You know, I've done reasonably well financially, so I'm lucky. Imagine if you had an injury like this and you're 18 years old and all your friends are going to university. You know, you're just going to go, no. A lot of people do, and that is really sad. So on the one hand, we need companies to engage and be open and learn and understand and want to understand, because I do think that people who are disabled are still very talented and have a lot of value they can add. But on the same side, we also need to try to support and help people feel more positive to want to do it, because you know, they shouldn't be frightened or fear it. They should engage and really, because I think a lot of our lives, our social life, you know, the things that help us mentally and so on, revolve around employment. And so, you know, there's a scary percentage of disabled people working, and there's a scary pay gap between those that are disabled and those that are not. And so, you know, these are things that need resolving.
Have you felt from the main board and from the investors a change in requests to, I mean, before they were asking just profit and dividends, and now it seems that they're asking more about D&I, inclusion, social responsibility, being green. Have you seen this change with the investors and the main board?
Yeah, I mean, without doubt. And again, I think what's their motivation to ask those questions? I think, look, let's hope there's two key motivations. One of them is they believe in it. Let's hope. You know, they believe that D&I, CSR, whatever, environment, these are important things. The second reason, the second motivation, is that they're trying to attract more money. You know, they need money to invest in the first place. To attract people to want to invest their money. People these days are choosing to invest it in things that are good, not bad. So, you know, they will look at industries that can demonstrate that their approach, you know, is the same as or meets the needs of the investors. Otherwise, people aren't putting their money in. So, So there's two motivations there. The genuine one, which is that's how I feel, and then the commercial one, which is, you know, also of course sensible. And they are, I mean, the beauty of this, and you know, people who don't think this is important, well, they're not going to be that successful, frankly, because the beauty is it's the right thing to do, of course, and we can feel good about that, but it's commercially beneficial as well. So, you know, it's got that very powerful argument. And, you know, the more we improve as a business, the more money we'll make. That's great. You know, the perfect situation.
Okay, thank you very much. Just as a CEO, if you can give your vision of the current situation today of the world, the situation, how do you feel that we are going to evolve in the next 2, but also in the next 5, 10 years? You have seen the world change in 20 years. What's your vision for the next 20? And how do you think the market and the way we are working will evolve?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a really easy question, obviously. You know, we've got to get past this virus first, and you know, clearly the numbers are going up everywhere, and I think, you know, this challenge is a long way from being over, sadly. Technology is going to keep coming. You know, as you know, we invest a lot of time and energy looking at innovations, ways of becoming more efficient, more engaging, being able to communicate better, you know, all the time. And if I just think of the huge amounts of technology we're now using, and of course this was tested, wasn't it, back in March, April, May, because suddenly we're all working from home, and it's critical that we have access to all the technology tools. So you know, this is really important, and that's going to continue. I think the other thing is that you know, I've been through very big economic downturns and upturns, and you know, I can go back to the first one being in 1992 in the UK, when our interest rates went to 16%, which is unbelievable when you think of it, interest rates today. But you know, we've been through that, the dot-com bubble bursting, the GFC, and then COVID. And I think there's going to be more and more of these. And I don't think necessarily they're always going to be global. You know, some of those are global, like the GFC. But you know, we have social unrest in Santiago, we have social unrest in Hong Kong. You know, we've had, you know, riots in France, we've had challenges. You know, there is always going to be political issues that we've seen, you know, clearly quite a lot of social unrest in America, in the US recently. There's always going to be issues that are local, and particularly because we're now in 37 geographies, this isn't going to go away. So we have to have a strategy that is flexible and can react to those different challenges. Because I think over the next 10 years, there's going to be more of these, quite a few local, but it's not going to be the old cycle, which is every 10 years you have a big downturn. I think there will be more of them, maybe more regional or country specific, but there will be more of them. So I think technology and the economy and the complexity of it is probably what's going to change the most.
Okay, and I would say for the final question, we have invited some directors. Some of them, maybe all of them, I don't know, are dreaming to become one day a CEO. What kind of advice would you give to a director today to continue to grow career-wise?
Yeah, I mean, look, you first of all, I mentioned it earlier, authenticity is key. You know, you've got to be believable. You've got to be a character that communicates well, hopefully, and one that people can empathize with. You know, you've got to live every single day as a role model. You know, you've got to demonstrate the behaviors that they respect, that they admire. you've got to be very, very visible, and you've got to be prepared for that, because you know, if you're someone that's quite shy or quite reserved or isn't comfortable presenting or whatever, then you know, becoming a leader is not for you. You've got to realize the commitment. I think there are people that would go, yeah, I'd love to be a leader, I'd love to be the CEO, whatever, but you have to understand the commitment it brings. This is not a, you know, a 9 till whatever the hours are in Spain, but quite late, I know. But it isn't a job that's just those hours. It's relentless. It's, you know, it's weekends, it's night and day, and you have to understand that commitment, because it's absolutely key. I think you know, without doubt, you have to have integrity. I mean, I haven't really mentioned that, but I take that as a given. I mean, you've got to be honest and straightforward, and you've also got to have the courage to do it. It is really difficult sometimes. You have to make really big decisions, and you know, they are. I've had to fire people that deserved it, and other people thought that, and I've had to fire people that perhaps were still very popular, but it was still the correct thing to do for business. And you know, you've got to stand by those decisions. There is no way that leadership is always going to be popular. So you have to understand that, you know, it will be unpopular at times. You know, you think of our situation. I'm sure when I went out like this to all of the directors in April and said, I want all of you to please voluntarily take a 20% salary cut. I'm sure I wasn't that popular when I did that, but equally maybe at the end of Q2 when I then announced that I wanted everybody to return to 100%, maybe that day was a bit more popular. But you know, you have to accept that if you want to be popular, don't be a leader, because at times you're going to be unpopular, and that's fine. You know, it is what it is, but that's not for everyone.
Okay, I have just a last question for you. You have been 35 years in the business. I've been 30 years. It appears that today, for young generation, being 30 years in the company is not a dream, and they look maybe at us like extraterrestrials, saying, "Well, what happened with that? We want to change every 3-4 years." Do you think there is a cultural shift, or you can still make a career of 30 years within one company?
Well, I have to be careful what I say here, because obviously we find people new jobs. So if everybody worked for 35 years in the same company, PageGroup hasn't got a good future. Look, it's a bit like any relationship. If you find the perfect partner, if the relationship is perfect, why change it? You know, we all know why relationships often start. It's the cosmetic reasons. You know, you find the perfect partner. She's beautiful, he's handsome, whatever it is, and that's how the relationship might start. But we know that the relationship survives if the personalities really work, and that's, you know, everything from a marriage, you know, through to a company. If the personality of the company, culture, as it's called, is perfect for your personality, why move? Why move? It's so difficult to find that perfect relationship, that perfect match with the culture. Then don't give it up easily. And you know, I've always enjoyed the culture of Page. It's the one reason I joined, and it wasn't popular back then. I mean, recruitment 35 years ago was not a popular thing to go and do. And I think my mother and father probably burst into tears when I told them I was going into recruitment 35 years ago, because I was a qualified engineer working for a successful company. And after 4 years, I was choosing to join this small business of 200 people. But I could tell from what Michael Page was describing to me in the interview, this was a culture that suited me. And if it does, then you should stay. And I have friends who've moved jobs every 3 years, and I've got friends who're still in the same company after 35 years. My best friend actually did that at IBM. Well, that's great. if it's perfect for you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Maybe we have now a certain number of questions from our audience.
Sure. Thank you very much, Nico. Thank you very much, Steve, for the insights. Very interesting, very, very deep. Thank you for sharing so personal things that helping us to become better person, at least, to say the least. So let me go for the questions that the audience are asking us in order they're getting in. So Luis is asking us, which are the top 5 countries, diversity and inclusion wise, on the business network? Which are the 5 countries that you think that they are most developed in that sense?
Yeah, an interesting one, because the challenges are never the same in every geography. For those of you who have a business in China, you'll know this. In China, in mainland China, outside of Hong Kong, we will have about 85% women and 15% men working for us. So diversity and inclusion has a different problem in China to everywhere else. You know, so there's an interesting example. So you have to look at diversity and inclusion in a different way in a different geography. So it's difficult to compare China with Spain or the UK. I would say most of Europe, the UK, and probably the US leads the way. They're probably the most advanced economically, and therefore they're probably facing into this situation. You know, I know there's high unemployment in the world, but most of that unemployment is not in the professional world. And for us, you know, you want to maximize the performance of companies, and therefore you want to be engaging with the whole population, you know, and that means men, women, you know, people with disability, whatever. And otherwise you just won't perform as much. So I think because our economies are that much more developed, we've probably looked at this challenge the most. So I would say, without being specific on 5, the US, the UK, Europe, probably the furthest ahead.
Thank you, Steve. Here we have a second question. It comes from Laura, and she says, in the current moment where home office and remote work are in place in many companies, how can you ensure as a leader that employees continue living the company values? Does your leadership style need to change?
Yeah, I mean, very good question, because it's absolutely true. Clearly, we've got to make sure that we're connecting using technology, because it's a massive advantage for us. We can still see each other, you know, in this situation. We can communicate examples, we can communicate role models, mentors, people who live the values can demonstrate how they live the values. So there are lots and lots of ways of engaging. So I think as long as you do that, and remind people and make sure you're very clear on your expectations as a leader, so that they understand what they should be demonstrating and why and how, it's still okay to be able to do that even with flexible working and home working. We're lucky as an industry, I have to say, in that performance is quite easily measurable in recruitment. You know, if a good recruiter is performing, then they will place people in new jobs and change their lives, which is our purpose. So you can see those that are performing and you can see those that aren't, but which makes that part of our job quite easy. But making sure that they're living the values, well, you've got to keep communicating, keep testing people, keep examining that, because it is absolutely key. For us, you know, I'm very proud to say our culture is very strong. Our values are very clear. I'd be amazed if people didn't understand our purpose, which is to change lives. And as a result, quite often as well, as offices have been opening, you know, actually a lot of people have been choosing to go back to the office, and maybe not 5 days a week or the entire day, but a lot of them actually enjoy being with their colleagues and sharing those values and so on if the opportunity arises. And obviously we have local lockdowns all around the world at the moment, but
Good. It brings to my mind, Steve, that when I was traveling a lot in my executive life, and I remember I was traveling every 15 days to the United States very often, and I used to talk to my mom, to my parents, and tell them I'm sorry because I couldn't come to see you. And my mom was saying always, all the time, Miguel, we don't see each other, but we feel each other. So, and many times during this remote virtual world that we're living, you know, the conversation came to my mind, saying how important it is for people not maybe to see you, but feel that you're with them, and they know you are there and you care. So, you know, that's a very good question from Laura in that sense. Great. We have another question from Miguel. He asks, Steve, what you are describing is a big shift versus what we find in companies culture today. Being conscious that companies must move forward towards what you say. How do you do it, departing from still quite hierarchical structures, you know, that the top down is still there? How do you do that shift, you know, in companies that they are very hierarchical? That's the question.
yeah, they are, but and some companies are still very old-fashioned and keep that strong hierarchy. I don't know whether it's because of a tradition or because they always have, or because they fear, they have a fear which people will undermine them or whatever, so therefore they like to keep their clear reporting lines. I mean, when I was working, I worked for a company called Johnson Matthey. They're a big precious metals company, and my degree was in metallurgy. I remember joining the company, I was 21, and I just left university. And this particular site only had 300, 400 people, but it had 3 dining rooms. They had a dining room for the people who were what we call blue collar, and then we had a dining room for those people that were like white collar, and then we had a dining room for the directors. I mean, it was incredible. So the guys that I played rugby with, I couldn't have lunch with. I mean, to me, that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever seen. And so to me, I mean, I don't have just a respect for a leader because he happens to have a good job title. I'm looking for individuals that I respect, and so, you know, I remember just before my injury, I was in India, and I went to see. We've got a really good business in India, and I have a particular passion for India, and it's not just the food. And I was in Mumbai, and I did a presentation to the whole office, and you know, I'll tell some stories and so on around the world of what's happening. And I remember that everyone was in there, including the receptionist, and she said to me, "Come on, we need to do a selfie." Really? And she said, "No, I want a selfie with you, Steve." And so we did a selfie. I mean, you know, this big ugly Englishman next to this beautiful Indian receptionist. Anyway, we did a selfie, and she said, "Steve, I've worked for Page for 7 years since we started in Mumbai, and I have 7 selfies on my wall at home." I mean, that's a little strange maybe, but why wouldn't you engage with the receptionist? She's worked for us for 7 years. That saved us 7 recruitment fees in my book. If nothing else, she's probably very good at her job now. So why wouldn't you retain anybody from the receptionist all the way through? So I just, people who want to hide in hierarchies, they shouldn't. They should feel comfortable with their leadership. And you know, I don't care what people call me, frankly. I'm their leader, and that's fine. But nobody needs to call me sir or Mr. Ingham. I mean, you know, I'm Steve, and I'll be judged accordingly.
Good. Thanks, Steve. Another question. We have plenty of them, so I will keep you busy today. Could you specify, it's coming from Carolina, and could you specify what activities you took on to achieve gender balance? Did you have a specific target, for example?
There are targets that are applied to us in the UK, for example, board targets. I believe in total meritocracy, just to be clear. I believe that, you can't positively discriminate to get to the correct answer. That's the wrong way, that's cheating. And we have a frustration in our organization because we're organically grown. So what I mean by that is, like Nico said at the beginning, we start as consultants and we get promoted. So of course that means that when you look at the top of Page, most of the people have been around for 20 years or more, clearly. And so whatever differences you're making today, it's going to take quite a long time to filter to the top. Now, I'm pleased to say that we've always done this, but we hire into the company 50% women, 50% men. I mean, it's actually 52% women, but wow, it's half and half. Okay. As soon as though it became some managers, it started to get lower. Then directors, okay, very low, and then CEO, very low again. We've managed to change that. So now we've got 50% managers, and we're now up in the 40% directors, but they are the more junior directors. So I don't hide from this. It's not good enough, but we still need to make sure that we're retaining those senior women to get that gender balance better. Clearly, we've also looked at things like the gender pay gap. So the difference between what women and men are paid. And that, I mean, okay, I heard one of the big investment banks the other day. I was recruiting for a head of D&I for the armed forces in the UK. And they've asked for some help, and this is no money, but they've asked me to help, and I was on their selection panel. And I was interviewing an investment banker, and I said, so you've been there 5 years, what difference have you made? He said, well, I think I've made a lot of difference. I said, okay, gender pay, how are you doing on that? He said, we're doing really well. There's a 40% gap. And I said, sorry? You're doing really well and there's a 40% gap. And he said, yeah, I know, but that's better than most of the investment banks. And you're like, what? I mean, it should be zero difference. Of course it should. So I think we're trying to change minds. We're working on unconscious bias, relating to all sorts of diversity challenges. We're working on all of the different angles. We've got a resource that's focused on it. It's in the front of everybody's agenda. And put bluntly, every single director and managing director has a strategic objective to improve these figures. Otherwise, they will get a lower bonus. So good. From the the reality of what you take home at the end of the year, through to clearly the idealism and the commercial realities of being a better balanced business, we're trying to change things. And lots of ideas along the way. I mean, we promote heavily the successful women in the business, and also hopefully the successful disabled and the successful, etc., to make sure people feel comfortable, because there are parts of the world that are slower, and therefore if one of our regional managing directors, Isabel, who runs France, which is our biggest country. So, our biggest country in Page, France, is run by a lady, and of course, therefore, she's a phenomenal role model. And I took her to China. I was going to China anyway, and I was going to cities like, where did we go? Shanghai, Shenzhen, and then we went to Hong Kong. And of course, as I said before, 85% of my staff there are women. She was a rock star. I mean, you can imagine. So, yeah, we want to really use people as role models, as mentors as well, just to show what's achievable and make more and more people believe.
Good. Good, Steve. Sounds great to me. I'm sure Carolina, it's Carolina, you got many specifics about it, so that's great. Here we have another question, Steve. Miguel is saying, crises seem to allocate people in the very center of companies. do you think that this is somehow related to fear in front of huge uncertainty, and then once we get a stability back again, we will be back to traditional models based on financial results and return on investment, short term, as it happened after the 2008 crisis? Or do you think that this people-driven trend has no way back?
No, I mean, we will recover. I mean, the first thing to say is we were lucky again in Page, because we are big in China. We have a very big business there, and so we were able to learn about the virus. I mean, they went into lockdown in January. You know, we often forget what happened. So in China, we were 100% of people working at home in January. And it was like a test market for us, because we were able to test how candidates were reacting, how clients were reacting, how consultants were reacting, how our technology reacted. We were able to test all of those things. And as we went into lockdown everywhere else, in the UK, in France, in Spain, Italy, initially, and then everywhere, we had everywhere in lockdown except China, who are now back in the office, and, you know, going back to normal. It will happen. I think what's key is that, well, hopefully, first of all, what is key is to make sure the company is prepared for a crisis. And there are a lot of organizations, particularly small ones, who weren't. And I mean, you can't prepare for every crisis, obviously, because you don't know what the crisis is going to be. I mean, I certainly didn't know there was going to be a virus. I mean, that's very different. But there are certain things you can do. You can make sure that in terms of your people, you know, you've got the most skilled people still working for you. In terms of your financial reserves, you know, we've always kept a strong balance sheet. Well, when you're in recruitment and when the market's impacted by a virus, clearly it's going to get difficult. You know, recruitment might not be the first thing on the agenda. So we know we need to have financial reserves. We had great financial reserves in the PFC, and that helped us. What that then allows you to do is, even though there's a short-term challenge, you know, people working at home, technology has to be at home, trying to engage with people, as somebody said earlier, trying to make sure that you're still living the values, but even in remote working, all of those different things. You can deal with those things, but more importantly, you can make the longer term decisions because you're prepared and you know you're safe, you know that financially you're okay. You can make the longer term decisions because they're not going to go away. You know, you can ignore them for a year or 2 years or however long it's going to take to get back to normal. I think it's going to be a long, long time. Or you can continue to make those big decisions. And you know, I'll give you one. We're rolling out a front office software, and it's going to cost us 40 million plus. We could have put it on hold. You know, it's a really important thing to be doing. That's why we're spending 40 million. Do you put it on a hold so that you hopefully don't disrupt the business? Everybody's working at home. Everybody would need to change the way they're working. You might save some money, but is it the right thing to do strategically? And it's not. So we continue to roll it out. We went into Poland, we went into Belgium, and now we've gone live in the UK, even with lockdown. And we go live in Germany in November, and then everywhere else next year, and we'll spend that money. You know, we're hiring good people, particularly good people that have got a good reputation with our clients and candidates from the competition. We've hired 279 people this year from the competition, who in 2019 billed £40 million. So, you know, we think that's a good long-term strategic decision to be making. So you've got to balance short and long term. And again, it amazes me sometimes how leaders will become consumed with the short term and forget the long term. And maybe the short term flatters you this year, but the long term flatters your career ultimately.
Sounds great to me. Thank you, Steve. Here we have another question. It comes from Javier. He's asking, could you please explain the why of Michael Page? Not the how or the what, the why we're doing our purpose.
Yeah, you're right. That's the technical term these days given to purpose. And I wouldn't admit that back in the day, you know, when I first started, we didn't have something called purpose. But we did have a why. You know, why are we doing it? We're doing it because we can change the lives of people. And I know some people will be thinking cynically, really? But it's not just the candidates' lives that we can change because we hopefully get them a better, bigger, more rewarding job, but the clients themselves. And again, you could say, really? I mean, clients, they look after themselves, they make their own decisions and so on. But if we give them better people, then obviously we can help them improve their businesses, and we can guide them and advise them on subjects like diversity and inclusion, for example. Absolutely. And you know, I know companies that, you know, like the UK, we have a national lottery called Camelot. I recruited 140 people for them so that they could go live with the national lottery on day one. We didn't have a lottery before. And so I know I made a difference. You know, 140 people were critical, including the chief executive who I hired for that organization, and it's been raising money for charities ever since. So, you know, you can make a difference. But most important of all, we as leaders can change the lives of the people working for us. You know, and I think that is absolutely key. I'm very lucky. I have a management team, you know, around the world. I have about 100 managing directors and above. And on average, they've worked for me for 20, 25 years. And you know, so I've known how they've progressed. They're great leaders. I'm very lucky. But they're only in Page because they want to be in Page. They could all give up and go and work somewhere else tomorrow easily. You know, I know lots of our competitors that would love to hire them, but they don't. And that's because they understand that why, that purpose. And we're all behind it. We now call it a purpose. We visually put it on the walls. We communicate it online. It's on our website, etc., etc. I honestly think if you asked any one of our staff, from the most junior to the most senior, what is our why, what is our purpose, they would tell you it's to change lives, and they believe it.
Good. Thank you very much, Steve. Here we have Angel. He's asking us, why in most of the companies diversity and inclusion means only gender? What happens with the rest?
You know, I find it strange why people think that. Could you imagine, okay, going to work and hating it and having to pretend you're something which you're not? Can you imagine that every day? You know, there can be nothing worse than not being allowed to be yourself. I mean, you know, I had a tough time at school, and I was at boarding school, so a very traditional, you know, British boarding school. And, you know, I was 11 years old, so, you know, suddenly you're on your own, no technology and so on. I was having to pretend to be something else, you know, and trying to agree with the bullies and so on. And I find that really very difficult. And so, you know, to me, we want to have a company where everyone can come to work and absolutely be themselves. And I remember a guy coming to me years ago. I was a director, and he said, his name was Jamie, so hi me, but Jamie. And he said, can I buy you a coffee? I said, yeah, you can buy me a coffee, or you can definitely buy me a beer, but you can buy me a coffee. And anyway, we went for a coffee, and he said, look, he was my best biller, and he said, I want you to know first, but I'm gay. And I said, well, why are you telling me? And he said, well, I want you to know, and I just want to make sure that, you know, you're comfortable with that. And I said, why wouldn't I be? You're our most successful biller, you know, you're an incredible employee. Why do I care? And you know, it makes no difference to me, Jamie, unless you feel that you want me to try to accommodate you in any different way. Now, he continued to be an amazing guy, and it made no difference to us at Page. And in fact, he helped me enormously. We've stayed close friends. And when I came out of hospital, I was staying in a flat at the time because I was having my house renovated. And my flat was on the 3rd floor with no lift. So, of course, I couldn't leave hospital and go home. So this guy, Jamie, he said, look, my flat is perfect. My apartment is perfect. It was in the centre of London. And he moved out and rented somewhere else so that we could live in his flat, myself and my fiance. And so, you know, what a lovely thing to do. And we were there for 5 months, so it was a big sacrifice he made. But you know, look, to me, everyone should feel comfortable. It doesn't matter whether they've got a mental health issue, whether their sexuality is different, whether they're female, whether they're old, whether they're young, or whether they're in a wheelchair, or they have some other physical disability. I really don't think. We want the most talented people at Page, and we want to get that right as much as we possibly can, but we certainly don't want to exclude people, race or anything else. We don't want to exclude people who couldn't make us better.
Good. I would love to hear more leaders talking like this. So thank you, Steve. Here we have another question. It comes from Giuseppe, and it's more concrete. What would you suggest to a 58-year-old CFO that have just lost his job or her job? Let me add. Right?
58. Well, that's poignant.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being 58. Let's be clear. There's nothing wrong with being 58. Look, I don't know you as an individual, whoever asked that question, but I would suggest, depending, they do what they want to do. So if they want to get another job, they should get one. They should try to calculate exactly what job that is, what type of job, what size. Do they want the biggest CFO job or CEO job, whatever it is? Do they want a smaller one? Do they want an international, national, whatever they want? And they should try to get it. It won't necessarily be easy because, you know, there will be companies out there trying to get people with less experience, more experience, that they won't pay as much or whatever. So, you know, you're going to have to accept that by the time somebody is paying the sort of salary that a CFO gets, they're going to want exactly what they want. They won't expect to be a 70% fit. They will expect 100% fit. And so just because you get rejected when you apply for jobs doesn't mean it's still not achievable. I believe as a 58-year-old that I have a lot to offer. I think there's a few more years left in the tank, or I hope there is. And so, yeah, if I lost my job, I'd still be looking for another one.
Good. Thank you very much. Here we have Enrique. He has, well, congrats for the session. And after so many achievements, what is your biggest challenge today, Steve?
This is a personal one, but I don't like the inequality in disability. And I honestly didn't know much about it before. I'm very honest about that. I mean, how many of you know somebody in a wheelchair? I only knew one, and that was from a distance. One of my closest friends, he runs our business in Asia. His daughter is a tetraplegic. So she had a skiing accident as well. Tells you something, doesn't it? But I don't know personally anyone in a wheelchair, or didn't. I do now, as you can imagine. I'm quite well networked now. And I find it really sad. I mean, I really do, that such a low percentage of disabled people work. Whether they feel they should work or whether the companies aren't out there to come to hire them, I don't know. And I'm trying to work on that. So I guess my biggest challenge today is how I'm lucky to be in this position. You know, I don't want to be famous, but you know, I am a CEO. I am in the FTSE 250, so I'm in the top 250 public companies in the UK. I've got a voice, I want to make a difference to disabled people. And I know that's a ridiculous challenge, and I won't achieve it. I'll achieve something, but I won't finish the job, because the job will go on forever. But I honestly think I could make some sort of difference, even if it's a small difference. And I really want to. I'm trying to get my head around that and work out how is my biggest challenge. So, you know, I've been engaging and talking to different bodies, different charities, different companies. Obviously, I've got a day job to do as well, but and a family and everything else. But you know, that's something that I want to do for the rest of my working career.
Steve, it reminds me once that I read that when we retire, we will regret not have used all the power we once had. So a lot of times we don't realize how much influence we may have in the world. And certainly, if I may, from your position, I mean, you have the power to reach to many people, and it's good to have you, you know, doing that role, if I may. So thank you very much for that. Here we have another question for the Mr. And this is more about macroeconomics, okay? When do you think that the economical situation will come back to normal status? Come on, Steve, you know that.
No, exactly. It's April the 27th. I just can't tell you which year. I don't know which year, but I can tell you that, no, I'm joking, obviously. Look, that's impossible to know. And it's interesting, isn't it? We're recovering everywhere. So everywhere is getting a bit better. You know, we just announced our results in Q3, and you know, the last month of the quarter, September, was better than August, was better than July, etc. When you look at year-on-year growth, so we are improving. And in China, we are flat year-on-year, so we're now the same as we were in 2019. In Japan, we're growing, so we're bigger today than we were in 2019. So they're starting to recover, ironically. How long this takes, I don't know. I googled all the I googled the statistics in terms of number of cases around the world this morning, and I was looking at different countries. The UK is almost the same as France. In Spain, obviously, you have your challenges in Madrid and elsewhere. They're going up everywhere. So I personally don't think normal is going to be anytime soon. I think we're going to have these challenges, particularly in Europe through winter. I think companies are realizing, and I do believe that at the beginning of this, in April, I think we sort of naively thought the virus would come. We knew that then, but then it would go. I'm not sure quite how it would go, but that's what we probably thought back then. Now we realize it's not going to go. So I think a lot of companies and people are trying to do as much as they can to get back to normal, even though there is a virus. So there will be lockdowns. I mean, we closed our office in Istanbul at the weekend, in Rome last week. You know, in Holland they're closed, in Switzerland they've closed and then they've opened. You know, this is going to go on and on and on. Kuala Lumpur we closed last week. You know, so this is going to happen. But I think companies and people, and it's typical of the human spirit, we want to try to get back to some sort of normal. That's going to take a long time, but I do think as a result, economies will start to improve. However, we have to remember, and I'm sure you're very aware of it in Spain, there are other issues. It's not all about the virus. You know, we have Brexit in the UK.
Yeah.
You know, there's political turmoil in the US. You have challenges in Spain. You know, we have social unrest in Hong Kong. You know, it goes on. So those problems, those challenges are still there. It's not just about coronavirus. So it's the two.
Oh, thank you very much, Steve. We still have many questions on the table, but the time is there. Do you want to share? Do you feel like sharing any final thought before me doing the closing of the day, or Nico, or Steve?
I'm very lucky to be given this opportunity, so I'll keep going. I can survive without a coffee a bit longer.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Thank you very much, Nico. I mean, I'm going to be closing the day. Thank you very much. I just took some notes. I mean, very insightful what you define about being a leader. And the word you repeated the most was authenticity is key, and role model. So, and if I may, I would like to share with the audience that you don't need to be a CEO to be a role model. You don't see to be, do you need to be a CEO to be authentic? So we can be authentic in any one of our roles in life. So another thought that I got from your, it was you make your own luck. So that's very insightful. I think that we have to be conscious. We were talking about the concept about returning on luck. It's not about what if we are lucky or we are not. It's what we would do with that. So let's make it up as Steve is suggesting us. It impacted me a lot, if I may, when you were in the hospital, Steve, and they told you they will not take you seriously when they see you in a wheelchair. I think it's a message that we have to, you know, mark in our, you know, in our heads, and to be sensitive about all situations in the world to help us to become better leaders and better people. And I got the point about if you want to be 100% popular, don't be a leader, because you have to make tough decisions and for the good of the person sometimes. And I read once, you know, that, you know, you have a, you know, a basket with fruit. The point about, you know, that bad apple that may influence all the others, but the good news, if you take that apple and you plant it somewhere else, it may flourish, but you keep that apple over there. So your job as a company, just placing the right people in the right place, I think it's one of the whys of your life. So thank you very much.